Welcome, everybody. This is Tim Watrous, President of Digital Advisors.
And this is Kevin Gordon, President of Capital Advisors Group.
We'd like to welcome you to our K-12 Politics and Tech video series.
Our objective is to give you the absolute latest of what's going on in Sacramento that affects public school districts, obviously, and as well as all the technology stuff that's going on that's so vital to delivering for kids these days.
And remember, if you find these videos useful, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and share out over social media. You're our marketing team. We appreciate your support, and let's go ahead and get started. All right, welcome everybody. Tim Watrous, President of Digital Advisors, back with another episode of K-12 Politics and Tech. As always, Kevin Gordon, co-host of this show, is here, President of Capital Advisors. Kevin, glad you're here.
Great to be with you, Tim.
Yeah, and a frequent and favorite guest, former Governor Bob Wise, joining us to help us with some of the gridlock discussions about DC. And Governor Wise, glad to have you back.
Good to be back.
Yeah, so, Kevin, the big news in the state is really all about vaccinations, governor's announcements, and California leading the way in some of these areas. Can you speak to what's going on in the news around vaccinations?
Yeah, so I think most school districts probably know the ramifications now because, again, it was announced just at the end of last week. But the idea is, of course, is that there will be a mandate now on students and staff, but the big news is on the students since we've had a vaccine mandate or testing in place for employees. This goes to vaccinations that'll be mandated and it'll be effective the first semester following the FDA's full approval of the vaccination, the COVID vaccination, depending on the age group. So we know that, like, for example, already 16, 17-year-olds are covered in what is the full implementation and approval of the vaccination, but they're going to wait till we get the which is right now emergency authorization between the 12-year-olds and up isn't fully authorized yet. That would happen. And then, of course, we know within the next few weeks, we're going to end up having some approvals for emergency authorization at even those younger age groups. But as soon as we get full authorization across these grade levels, we're going to see mandated vaccinations going into effect. A lot of people think it could actually hit as early as January, but definitely more likely it'll be in time for next fall. Maybe a July 1 start date, but next fall for sure in terms of implementation. The one big question mark that school districts are all asking now is that under the current sort of setup, or at least what's envisioned, given that this is done by executive order by the governor, that there are those exemptions for whether it's religious or personal medical reasons that you can opt out. We believe the legislature will act as they have done with other vaccinations that are required in schools to eliminate that opt-out. And I am very confident the legislature will move quickly on that when they come back in January. But that is not the case right now. A lot of people are debating about whether that's going to happen. I'm almost certain that that in fact will happen. So good information for everybody to keep in mind.
Well, yeah, we'll keep folks posted on that as that continues to evolve. I'm sure we've not heard the last of either side of those orders, and yeah, we'll like I said, we'll keep everyone posted on future episodes. So, with that, last time we were talking about the four-ring circus in DC. Figured that there would be some kind of action by this time, but here we are, beginning of October, and still kind of stuck in the mud back in DC. So. Governor Wise, can you just share a little bit about Four Ring Circus and kind of where that stands as of today?
Sure, it's a good thing that the U.S. Congress isn't under the same recall provisions that state officials in California are, because I'm not sure there'd be too many left. Right now, what we've got is the four-ring circus, and if you remember, it was the infrastructure bill, it was the reconciliations bill, it was the appropriations, and there was one more in there, but anyway, it was the debt ceiling. And so what we've got is one circle is temporarily removed because the government was set to shut down because the appropriation bills had not been passed on October the 1st. They passed a short-term spending resolution. That means that they'll be able to spend money into the next fiscal year, which started October 1. They can spend until December the 3rd, then we can go through the whole drama again. But at any rate, for right now, the government, in terms of the appropriation bills not being passed, the government is funded, and it's funded at its current level. So you're not going to see any great differences in spending. So that's taken care of. Now, the big one, and the one that everyone's looking at right now, is the debt ceiling being extended. We're supposed to reach our limit and start defaulting on debt in this country as of October the 18th. The uh, there's a lot of argument going back and forth. Will Republicans vote for it? They say no. They want Democrats to pass it. I was in Congress 18 years on the Budget Committee. This is something that has to pass. And just for the record, this is not it's not about authorizing new spending. It's about whether you vote to continue paying the bills that you've already run up. And so eventually they have to pass it. But the question is whether there'll be Republican and Democratic votes. And my guess is that this goes down to the wire probably next week. In terms of that is tied to what they call the reconciliation bill, $3.5 trillion of additional funding. If you recall, that has in it child care tax credit, has additional provisions for job training. It has a whole lot in it, health care initiatives and so on. It's pretty evident that even the president is now acknowledging that they're going to have to come to agreement with the Democratic moderates as well as Republicans if they can pick any up, and that price tag will probably come down. But they took the time, they've taken some of the pressure off and said, well, we don't really have to do it before October the 1st, which was the deadline. So there'll be a lot more drama on that one. My guess is what I've been saying on this show is that it'll probably will come in at somewhere between $2 and $2.5 trillion. The big one, Tim, that both houses have passed, but they haven't passed the final version, and it's holding things up. And there is funding in there for education. Some is infrastructure. That's about a $1.1 trillion bill. Has money in it that would help schools remove lead from pipes. It also has $65 billion in it for broadband connectivity that could be used for schools and wiring communities. And so that one's very important. Both houses have passed it, but Democratic moderates refuse to. They want to pass it before they have to vote on the reconciliation bill. The progressives say, no, 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 you got to pass the big spending before we pass the infrastructure bill. It's terribly snarled, and I don't envy Speaker Pelosi right now on this one because she's got to negotiate it. But all of which is to say, you're not going to lose any money yet. You're not going to lose any money. You're going to see more high drama, particularly over the next 2 weeks. The debt ceiling has to be extended, or otherwise this country defaults for the first time in its history. And at the end of the day, my guess is that in terms of what you can look towards annual Title I funding and so on is just about what you've been receiving. The question is, the big unknown is how much could be in the reconciliation package, knocking it down from 3.5 trillion, knocking it down to something lesser, but what'll be in there for education, which is why I keep coming back to, and I'm going to say it one more time. Think of the dollars you've already gotten from the 3 stimulus packages, CARES, CRRSA in December, and the American Rescue Plan. Be working with those, and then count on level funding probably for the most part for the rest of it.
Got it. So, hey, Bob, I had a quick question for you. So, the $82 billion that we heard was because the president did not get the infrastructure plan he had for schools, which had modernization, new
Right.
construction in it at $100 billion. He didn't get that in the infrastructure plan. They substituted with an $82 billion kind of substitute. Where was that? Was that in the appropriations bill, or was that in the big 3.2 trillion,
No,
3.5 trillion dollar?
that is to be in there's a lesser amount in the infrastructure bill.
Okay,
65 billion is in the infrastructure bill itself that I believe at this point both houses have agreed upon.
got it. Okay,
You may see some additional funding that could come in the reconciliation package, the big one, the 3.5. But in terms of what's to be voted on and what could be passed tomorrow, if we could get agreement between the progressives and the moderates, this is an intra-party battle on the Democratic side. What could be done tomorrow is the infrastructure bill.
got it. Great.
Well, again, we covered this last time, but digital divide, bridging the digital divide and connecting communities, like you said, Bob, was anywhere between 100 and 65 billion now, which was on the low end of solving the problem. And hopefully that doesn't get whittled down any further.
No,
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I agree. But also to Kevin's point is what did get taken out of the infrastructure bill was money for infrastructure, school infrastructure. And that was going to be at one point $100 billion divided equally, 50 for direct funding for school infrastructure and another 50 in bonds. And that did come out of the infrastructure bill.
Right.
Yeah, sad to see that go. As we know, there's a lot of schools out there that need that kind of support. So just one thing on the federal side, we've been talking about the FCC and the work that they've been doing to try to help bridge the digital divide using the tools and infrastructure we have now. One was called the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program, and that was basically the FCC's helping subsidize families to access the internet by covering a portion of the monthly bill for whichever providers you choose. There's about 6 million families that have chosen to participate in that. There's still additional dollars there. So if you have families that are struggling and you're looking for budget, that is available. Also, there's some dollars for continuing that in that infrastructure package that we're talking about to bridge the digital divide. There's some dollars specifically to extend. So if you're worried about that going away after this year, which was a concern, that should be extended if we see this pass, and we'll look forward to that for sure. So
But
Kevin,
just remember
oh,
that
please,
there
please.
there are two bites at the apple on this for schools. Well, actually for parents and schools. One is what you just said, the emergency benefit program. I think they call it EBB or EBP. But then there's also essentially that increase that you've talked about often in E-rate, and that also offers a generous, actually even more generous money that school districts can give directly to parents for purchase of devices. The difference is that in the program we first discussed, the emergency benefit package, parents have to apply. My urging is school districts help them become aware of how to apply. In the other one, the school district actually puts all that in the application.
Right, right. Well said, Bob. Yes, and both are still active. But I was just calling that EBB out simply because
It's
there is a
important.
great number, yeah, a great number of folks that have participated already, and there is still opportunity without the similar sort of window that the ECF has. So don't want to throw too many acronyms at you, but if you have questions, you can always check in with us. We'll be happy to answer them for you. So, Kevin, just speaking of infrastructure upgrades, I know there's some California specific ventilation legislation or funding that's available. Can you just talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, so one of the things, and we're always looking at what's going on with the Energy Commission, and they just announced this last week that they are now allocating $165 million. It's for the assessment, maintenance, and repair of ventilation systems. It's going to go out with a priority for underserved communities. But this just got released that the California Schools Healthy Air Plumbing and Efficiency, it's CalShape, ventilation program is now accepting applications. So you want to look up CalShape ventilation if you're doing something in that area. And a lot of districts are because they're using, Bob, as you were pointing out prior to our recording today, that we've got that ESSER money out there. People are using it for ventilation because it's allowed to be used for that. There are some restrictions about its relationship to COVID specifically. There's a lot of different things that you can do with that money, but if you're going for a project, make sure you check out this CalShape program to see whether or not it can augment or help you in whatever projects you might be trying to pursue.
Thanks for bringing that up, Kevin. And we'll put the links to that in the email that goes out, and then also beneath the show in the show notes on YouTube. So please feel free to check that out and click there. And Kevin, we've all been kind of like worried about the economy. The economy seems to be performing better than anyone anticipates. The LAO came out with some guidance, or at least some projections this week early. Can you tell us what the LAO released this week?
Yeah, it was kind of uncharacteristic of the legislative analyst's office to do any big prognostications before a major report that they release at about the second, third week of November. But the nonpartisan legislative analyst was quoted in a story in Politico last week that said that revenues are running substantially higher than what was anticipated in the Budget Act that we just passed. So again, it's this behavior we've gotten used to, sandbagging a little bit for what happens next year. What is next year? An even numbered year? Yes, an election year. So it stands to reason they don't want to blow everything. So, in anticipating a continuing growth in the economy, the legislative analyst is suggesting that we will end up with a budget that is between $5 billion and $25 billion ahead of revenues than the Budget Act even contained. And the reason why that's significant is we basically already hit the $5 billion over when you take a look at the growth in the year that's already started, as well as revisions in the revenue for the year that just closed. They actually did an upward revision in the amount of money we ended the year with. Of course, there's a carry in balance as a result of that. So you look at our overall situation right now, it's already substantially higher. But the notion that it could be as high as $25 billion higher is pretty significant by a legislative analyst that tends not to overstate things. So we'll see where it ends up. Who knows? It could even be better. At the same time, that $25 billion figure is their high end. And it's hard to predict, what the economic behavior of the state's going to be this far out. So, we always do urge some caution. Now, the one thing that's really important to always remind our friends across school districts in the state is that we've got a budget that was adopted this year that is significantly more money that's one time than it is ongoing, and that there is a cliff effect at some point. What a lot of one time money could end up doing in the budget next year as a result of these revenue dollars is put us in a situation where it delays that cliff effect maybe out another 12 months or so than what we were expecting when we would hit that circumstance. So still got to be careful with regard to overall budgeting. We got an awful lot of this money that's one time.
Thanks for sharing that, Kevin. And good news to hear that at least early on, it looks like we're going to be in even better position than we had hoped when we started this new school year. Just speaking of funding and some of the challenges that we're facing coming back to school, absenteeism is a major issue. You've got things like, COVID uh, outbreaks and quarantines that are impacting this. Kids that are in independent study, the rules, the way things are set up, things were challenging before with absenteeism for some districts. It's much more difficult now, especially in the rural districts. But there are districts like Stockton Unified, Oakland, Long Beach, who's traditionally very strong with attendance, that are struggling right now because of a lot of these issues. And Kevin, I know you probably have a little bit to add here, but this is something that we're hearing a lot about or reading about, and maybe you can add a little bit on from your side as well.
Yeah. So so one of the things that's given rise to is a discussion about one of the things that did not go into the budget this year, which was a sort of an overt hold harmless on what happens in the current year with regard to ADA. And one of the reasons why it didn't happen is the legislature said, look, we recognize that we have a historic feature of school finance in California, which says you get the best of whatever is in the current year or the prior year, whatever gives you more, right? The problem is that the reason why we need them to layer in a hold harmless on top of it is because it gets you through that following fiscal year. If they don't do anything at all to do a hold harmless in the current year, the following year, 22-23, is going to be a really difficult year for a lot of districts. And that's the thing that we're concerned about. So it's given rise to that discussion. It's also given new sort of breath to the whole idea of the notion of enrollment-based funding rather than ADA-based funding. And I think enrollment-based funding is going to get some good debate next year. I know that Chairman O'Donnell in the Assembly of the Assembly Ed Committee is not a big fan of enrollment-based funding because he thinks he doesn't want to undermine the incentive that every district needs to have to make sure kids show up. There are ways, however, to accomplish that, even in an enrollment-based system, like many states have an enrollment-based system, but they'll have incentives built in to create additional funding opportunities, sometimes even penalties, depending on what's going on with your overall attendance, making sure that attendance is a priority. So I think there's a way to get both of them done. We'll see where the debate goes next year.
Thanks, Kevin. And I'll just say, for the districts that are struggling with this, I think traditionally you'd send a letter home, and notify parents that the absentee issue is a issue that's getting worse. And letters is not the greatest way to reach people these days. There are actually some AI tools that are out there that schools can use. You may be leveraging something now, but if you're not, you should definitely look into this, because there are companies out there that have multiple points of data to help you understand the best way to reach certain types of families. And the reality is, it's going to vary depending on who you're dealing with, and then it will help you understand the best way to reach them, and then the right cadence to use when you're trying to approach them as well. It's a really tough challenge. It's not going to go away. I don't see it going away anytime soon. If you haven't deployed any real technology tools to help you, there are tools out there that exist that you might want to start thinking about deploying, that use artificial intelligence again and work with sort of sorting out your data to help on this project. So happy to, we're actually going to share an article. Some of the tools are called out in there. And if you have some more questions, again, please let us know. We'd be happy to help you there. So one question, Bob, is, we know supply chain is a big issue. And, we've talked about it many times. Devices are hard to come by. If you order one today, it might take you 3 or 4 months to get a device, maybe even if you're lucky. And this is impacting automakers. It's impacting everyone. But now this is starting to impact some things that are near and dear to our hearts, like food and so on. So, I don't know, Bob or Kevin, if which one of you wants to start in this one, but this one's starting to
Let
get,
Kevin start. Let,
yeah,
let
please,
Kevin start with
Kevin.
that because he's been following this so
Yeah.
closely.
Yeah, I mean, U.S. Department of Agriculture did announce this last week that they're going to provide even more flexibility in the school meal program because of supply chain issues with regard to food product. And it's really apparent. I mean, a lot of our districts across the state have talked about these problems, so much so they've wanted flexibility on, frankly, not being able to serve the types of meals and the cadence that they're used to because they're that profound a shortage. So the USDA did put out some guidance saying there should be some flexibility there. And I know, Bob, you guys have seen this before in the past with the Secretary of Agriculture, and you've got a little bit of experience working with him.
Secretary Tom Vilsack was secretary under President Obama. Prior to that, though, remember he was governor of Iowa for 8 years, and so knows and his wife is a teacher, and so knows the agricultural world well, knows the food processing world well, and so no surprise that he would take these steps to provide that additional flexibility because he knows the steps, the food chain, all the way through to the final consumer.
Right. That's one of the other issues that I didn't mention earlier that I wanted to try to cover today was a real quickie on the Brown Act. And it was just that since we actually visited with all of you last, the legislature and the governor did act relative to extending the authority that the governor provided in his executive order last year regarding the Brown Act. So, but it does require districts to adopt a resolution every 30 days in order to have that flexibility to continue to do virtual meetings. And then once you actually adopt that resolution, you comply with the legislation, you're good. But you can also do things like you can do more than just the minimum. The board can actually meet in together if they want. And then you can do the virtual testimony if you want. And some people are being critical that extending these was inappropriate and was somehow going to be not as transparent or limit public engagement. And I definitely have to disagree. And the numbers really tell the story, which is that we've had such an incredible amount of participation in school board meetings that we've never had before at a much higher level in terms of numbers because it's easier for parents in the community to access it when they do it virtually. And then they have the opportunity to be heard because those same rules with regard to timing and all that usually typically take place. So you've got that opportunity to participate and engage in school board meetings that we haven't had before. And the other big news that we've seen both from the California School Board Association as well as the National School Board Association is all about sort of the degradation of the civil discourse that's happening in board meetings, the threats and all of those kinds of issues that are going on are making headlines as well. So there's a lot going on with regard to access to public meetings, a good on the side of greater engagement, not necessarily great things in terms of some of the threats and the violence and some of those things that have taken place. But again, definitely grabbing the headlines since we last met.
Yeah, just a quick note on that. The National School Board Association last week wrote a letter to the president and to the White House asking to see what kind of federal role could be taken to help improve the civility, not because of just what you say, Kevin, is that some of the school board meetings are turning out to be so contentious, and school board members, superintendents, others being threatened.
Yeah.
Well, challenging times for sure, and appreciate Kevin and Bob you being here and sharing your expertise with everyone out there who's fighting the good fight every day in education. So, thanks to all of our leader friends for watching. Any questions, please let us know as always, and we'll look forward to sharing some more. Hopefully, when we get some progress back in DC, maybe in a couple of weeks with you. So, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Kevin and Bob, for being here.
Great.
Good to be with you.
So thanks again for joining us for another week of this broadcast.
And I just want to take a moment to remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and share this out over social media. Again, you're our marketing team. I'll also finish by saying, if you have some questions, please send them our way. We'd be happy to address them on a future broadcast. So with that, thanks everybody, and we'll talk soon.